February 22nd version of the Finance Committee. We will be going over a few budget items this evening. It'll be, I believe, a very quick meeting. I want to get a finance director update from Alicia. She's been out, so we welcome you back. It's so great to have you back, believe me. I speak for all of us. Talk a little bit about the FY23 budget update, some things that might have come in over the last few weeks since we met with the select board, and maybe a way forward, what we're trying to accomplish, and maybe some of the pitfalls that we might run into now with some of the new funding requests. If we have any public input, member updates, we'll approve any minutes we have hanging out there, and then we'll adjourn. So I don't expect too much. I do want to speak directly to the reserve fund transfer. I did meet with Mr. Mullen, who did have the transfer request in. I talked to him about our financial policy a little bit, and I just let him know that I think the board would have a very hard time approving the request based on our policy on what a reserve fund transfer should be. So I told him I wasn't going to dissuade him from going to the board. Obviously, I'm just one person and we have a full board. If he still wanted to present it, then I'd absolutely would entertain that for a vote. So I didn't dissuade him that way, but I did let him know that at first glance, looking at his reserve fund transfer, I was going to have trouble pointing it towards an emergency fund type transfer that we would typically approve. So he decided to withdraw the request, and I let him know that I would work with Alicia and Anthony and whoever else to maybe find another financing source. Just to let you know, the request is obviously for some of the movement of town offices, some of the offices to that space with the library vacated. So the initial request that he's looking for now is really just for the electrical, because nothing can really happen until the electrical piece gets sorted out. And I think that was going to be like $9,500 now. So I'm hoping we can find money somewhere else for him, or he can continue working with the finance team, or if any of you have any ideas. And I understand that Alicia with Park and Rec was going to be coming forward with a significant request as well, obviously to fill that space over there. So my recommendation was for them to kick it to the normal fiscal budget at the beginning of next year, and that's when we could really address it and put it into the department's budgets as opposed to a reserve fund transfer. So kind of wanted to get that out there. If anyone has any comments, if you think I overstepped, please speak. I just, it was one of those things that
I don't think you overstepped, Gary. But one of the things that I'd like to throw out there and make everybody aware, and I don't know what this process has been over time and how it got to this point where Ed is moving into that space, but we had 2 studies done, and we spent at least $500,000 on these 2 studies. And when I was treasurer, I sat down with 2 different architectural firms, and every single department head did that to find out how much space we were going to need. And they went back, and as far as I know, and I saw the first study, I didn't see the second one, but they did like building blocks. This department needs this much space. Here's where they should go. They were looking at not only Shattuck Street, but they were looking at what if we had an external building. DCU was still in play at the time, or Indian Hill was still in play at the time. And they put all those puzzle pieces together. What if we had this building? What if we didn't have this building? I have not heard that we're following either one of those plans. So it's like we threw away $500,000 because one department voiced a preference to go into that space. And I don't know what conversations he had with the selectmen and what came over in that meeting and how they decided it. But it just seems like we are totally jumping the gun. Number one, his whole department restructured didn't even come out of that Saturday meeting. You got two positions. You got the Board of Health person and the conservation person. Other than that, nothing else made it through. So he's designing a space for this big department that he has. And that's a huge space down there.
Yeah.
More space than what his people right now probably need.
Yeah.
I would voice a concern that it needs to go back to the selectmen and really take a look between now and July. What are we going to use this space for? How are we going to reconfigure town hall? And if it makes sense for him to go there, that's fine. But at least somebody's looking at what we paid this money for. And I'm not convinced that we have.
Yeah, I did express my concerns. I reached out to Chairman DeCoste as well. And we talked a little bit about, I had some of the same concerns, and you're not the first one to express it. A couple of members, I think Alvin had expressed some concern as well. Not you, Tyler did actually. They had an email specifically with Tyler. Mentioned some of the same things, Steve. So and so that's when I reached out to Chairman DeCoste, and he mentioned that, well, he kind of agreed to what you just said. I think that, Steve, Ed Mullen going forward and making things happen. I mean, it's fantastic. He's motivated. He wanted to get things moving, and that I don't want to ever snuff that out. But at the same time, I think that in retrospect, I wish the select board perhaps had gotten an in-house committee of department heads overseen by Anthony, and let's talk about using the same thing you referenced from several years back. And I know not everybody's knows that reference that we're talking about, the money that was spent on figuring out what space needs we're going to have. But I think definitely got ahead of ourselves. I think I'm not saying I don't want to become part of the political piece to this. I've always said, I want to stay on the finance side, and we are. I didn't think at all that this met the criteria even to come before us as a reserve fund transfer. And that's where I kind of stayed with it. But I do appreciate you, because I didn't bring the rest of the board up to speed kind of on that whole other part of where this originated from. When the library created a vacuum, it wasn't a surprise, right? We knew it was coming. Probably should have been part of a budget, either the select board's budget, town administrator's budget, for this movement of offices into that space. I just don't think it was ever discussed, and it wasn't planned. So that's not our job. It's nothing against the finance committee by any means, or the finance team. All we can do is manage the finance requests in front of us. So I think that's being addressed by Chairman DeCoste, and I would agree with you. I think it's a smart thing to put the brakes on, and whether Mr. Mullen's in charge of it makes a lot of sense, obviously from his office. But what it actually looks like, you're right. How do we create office space for people that are not hired yet or may not be hired?
Right.
So I think it makes sense to really push a lot of this into next year. The electrical piece, to wind it back a bit, makes a little bit more sense. I think the space needs to have the electric, upgraded, or whatever has to happen. That makes sense no matter what happens to the space. So,
but that should be part of an overall plan. I mean, how can you do drops for computers and everything if you have no floor plan and you're designing offices for people that don't exist, type of thing?
Right.
I mean, one of the things that town hall needs, is in desperate need of, is conference rooms. And I mean, there are none anymore. HR took the last conference room up in 307. So there's no place to meet in that building anymore. Whatever's going to be designed in that first floor or the second floor, I mean, conference space needs to be priority there. And
yeah, No, thank you.
I know we're not a political board and we're not supposed to be,
I
but
know. It's hard though. It's a fine
we
line.
spent $500,000 and it's up to us to make sure that we didn't spend that money on nothing.
This
Right.
doesn't need to be political. It can be financial, and the question should be posed as we spent X amount of dollars, $500,000 on a plan. Where are we at with that plan? What's the future hold? Are we going to get more requests coming down the road for other things that we're not privy to at this point, because we spent that $500,000 on a plan which we never saw the results of?
Yeah.
And I think that's where we stand on this. I'm with you, Steve. I hate to see us throw money away and all of a sudden somebody's got flavor of the month here and they want to take the space. I mean, I commend Ed for being aggressive and getting out there, but we had a plan. We had a needs study that was done for that space. What are the results of that? I don't even know.
But
So planning from a financial perspective, Gary, we should know what that is so we know what's coming down the road, what's going to be used there besides just Ed moving in and taking it over.
Okay, any other comments on that? I didn't want to belabor
Yeah.
that.
Well, I just had a question, I guess more from my education, but when I was looking at this, it just seemed like a very specific number. And yet when we had the request for the transfer for the air conditioning, that was a certain bill. And I didn't realize the form doesn't allow for, a lot of detail, but I would have liked to have known exactly what this made up, because maybe some parts of it could have been budget and some parts of it could have been, necessary, but it's hard to really tell just looking at this number.
Yeah, that's true. And I know, Alicia, you've had conversations with Mr. Mullen probably, and this, I don't know. The part that I spoke directly to was the electrical piece. I mean, I know that the elevator is going to need some modification to get up to code, but that's, once again, that would be that would even be a stretch for an emergency fund transfer, because we're not being mandated to do it immediately. It's more of a, we can put it into the budget next year. So,
all of this can wait until July.
yeah,
And that gives us the time to at least put some type of plan in place. And like I said, if it winds up being that Ed's area makes no sense to go down there, great.
I think he really took the bull by the horns and I don't ever want to snuff that out. I really don't. I just think it should have been controlled from probably the town administrator's office or the select board really directing it and how this should look based on the study that was done, just like you said, a few years ago.
Exactly.
Through the chair to Steve. Steve, you happen to have a copy of that study?
No.
Yeah. No, we didn't. That's why we just thought it should never even have been a discussion for us. I mean, there was it wasn't a feasibility. It was a space needs on the town offices, and what each department needed for space. And we spent $500,000, and it was really mapping out the DCU. It was mapping out the current space of town hall with the library vacated. And I think it was mapping out Indian Hill when we were looking at that facility. So a lot of money was put into it. And Ed might not even be aware of that. I don't even think Ed was an employee by the town. So he was just doing, hey, this space got vacated. I'm in planning. I can make this happen. And he started doing it. But I just think.
But that's where management, I guess, missed it or wasn't involved in it, because as soon as Ed brought that up, somebody should have said, hey, we did a study. What does the study say?
Yeah, here's what
We know that the select board didn't do that, didn't look at it and say that they were a priority, or
I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't involved in the stuff last year and kind of took a year off of things. So
and
I don't know what really happened.
I mean,
The money was spent, and I don't think we ever saw the results of it.
I mean, the select board obviously did.
Yeah, they did, but I don't think we got a copy of it. I don't recall seeing anything.
I don't either. And
I can remember the first study that was done, and the architect at the time published this thick book, and because I was one of the original people on that Space Needs Committee. It was one of the department heads that were on there. And the copy is probably still sitting in my office on top of the cabinet, because I know Ed doesn't move stuff in there. But we brought in somebody else after that, with a different firm. And this was during Nina's time, because I know Nina was sitting in on those meetings too, because she was there when I was there. So it wasn't that long ago that we did that. They did present something, but I wasn't paying attention at the time.
Steve, was that first book like a $250,000 book, and then they just
Oh, at least.
the other $250,000 on the rest?
At least.
Okay, so I
Would you
guess,
guys be comfortable with me requesting a copy and then I can forward a copy to the finance committee?
I think Anthony should have copies.
yeah, maybe, I just don't think it,
And I'm not certain that we need to
right, I don't,
have them.
Okay,
But somebody should be looking at them, and
besides where.
maybe the select board already has. I just not aware of it. And
Yeah, our concern would come with, okay, that comes to light again. Here's plan. What's it gonna cost? That's when it should come to us on.
Right.
Department needs what? Probably the town administrator's office, since he'd be doing it theoretically. It would go into his budget, and here's why: $50,000. I don't, to make cubes and all the other things that they want to do in there. But I do want to just mention the fact that I know Ed and Alicia too, to some degree, has spent personal time in there on weekends, cleaning it up, getting it, so there is some work that's gone into this, but I just think it was missed, probably, like you said, lack of management and direction. So I think it's hopefully this, at the end of the day, this comes out to, it's obviously going to be a better space for the town. But I don't think it's ready for us yet to make any type of decisions financially. Maybe for the next budget, we might see a number, but definitely not for a reserve fund transfer. That's
no.
so.
And it was pretty clear that, at least in my opinion, that this wasn't going to cut it as a reserve fund transfer. So
Okay, so I do appreciate Ed pulling it from our agenda anyway, but I just wanted to let you know that's kind of and thank you, Steve. That's kind of the history behind it.
Alicia, I know this is your first go around with reserve funds in a town.
yeah,
Are
I'm
you
trying to
okay
figure
with the process now. And I mean, everything should really, the department head should really be going to Anthony, and Anthony should be coming to you to see about funding.
Yeah,
And then the decision is do we need a reserve fund type?
It's on our website. It's one of the top bullet. You can just click on the link for your reserve fund transfer, and it speaks to it. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and it talks about the town administrator's involvement, and how he literally should vet this, and Alicia as well. And then, we do get these. It was I don't know if it was written into here.
Yeah, I got that transfer after, so I signed on after. So the board had already voted it, Anthony had already signed off, and then I got the transfer. And then I got an explanation of the transfer, but that's only because I was outside.
Yeah, but it really is, the whole reason to have the town administrator and you involved is to find every other possibility before coming for reserve fund transfer. That's all. What are the other funding sources that we have? And then something added into here, more of a handshake type of an agreement, is we will not look at a request unless the select board sees it first to give a recommendation of approval or not approval. We don't have to abide by what they say, but it's more of a courtesy to let them know this reserve fund transfer came in, they give a recommendation, and then we will review it. So just
If
let
I
you know.
identify a different bucket, Gary, if I find, like, let's say they have capital article funds, do I just tell them, yep, I've identified this funding, you can use this, you don't need a reserve fund transfer?
Are you saying if it doesn't meet the criteria, or if you're?
No, I'm saying, so they said, I want a reserve fund transfer.
Yeah.
And then Alicia does the deep dive. This is what I'm doing. And then she finds these buckets of lines and their capital articles that they have that they could use. Do I just tell them, no, there's no need because you already have a capital article for that?
You can do that, but I would definitely work with Anthony, and that's per the policy, because we don't want to just say no to the, you shouldn't be saying absolutely not
Okay.
to reserve fund transfer. You should let Anthony say it.
Okay.
Because he can say, hey, let's look at this first. Alicia, you're on to the right track here. Let's find a different funding source. And if you say, that's really not legal, or we really can't do that, or it doesn't make sense, and this does meet the criteria to go forward, then we go forward with it. And if it can't be funded, then it's not an emergency. Then it has to wait till the next budget's. So
Everything, I think from what I'm hearing is everything needs to funnel through Anthony, basically.
it does.
And,
Yeah.
he's the town administrator. So he says, Alicia, go find the money, then find the money.
Yeah.
You can't find it,
Answer.
then you go back to Anthony and say, I can't, but maybe a reserve fund would work.
Okay.
So, all right.
In other words, departments should be coming to you first. They should be going to Anthony.
I had a meeting with Anthony today, so he was telling me to direct them back towards me. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, and it's new to both of you. I know it's new to you. You definitely didn't have to deal with this in the city.
No,
Yeah,
but it's
council.
nice to figure out. So I appreciate any little bit, anything Steve can tell me, I'll take it so that I'm making sure I'm following the right procedures.
Yep. So, all right, let's get on to your updates, Alicia. If you just to
Oh, well, I don't have anything to show today. Usually I do, but since I've gotten back, I have been slammed. People just keep
I know.
coming in my office like a rotating door. So I made a checklist and I haven't even got all my checklist items. But as far as the budget, what we did do is we budgeted 8% for health insurance, and it actually came in at 4.9. So that gave us some savings. And I know the school requested additional funding.
Yeah.
Then they had said before they wanted the money, they turned back, and then they came up with a much larger number because of the OPM. And we have some additional money that we put aside for reserves that we can go into. Right now, I need to meet with the town administrator this week on the facilities budget. I see deficit lines, so we're going to discuss and kind of figure out a plan and what we need to do and how to approach it and how this is going to affect next year. So that's something that just is on our horizon as well.
okay, so when we start hitting deficit lines, and Steve, you can jump in here on some of these budgets. Do we propose a freeze? Do some of these budgets get frozen so they don't continue to spend its deficit, or what do we typically freeze budgets?
Well, if I implement a spending freeze, I would probably go up to the TA first, ask them, can I implement a spending freeze? And then what I usually do is sweep money because of the freeze into that deficit department. And right now with the facilities, it's the utilities. That's the issue. So we got to pay utilities. So I just have to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to target it with Anthony and Joe.
Okay, now this is rating.
Usually if a budget, an expense line is going negative, you can allow the expense line to go negative as long as the total expenses are okay.
That's correct. By law, yes.
Yeah.
So we're trying to come up with a plan because we're seeing the line start and it's getting close to the overall. That's why we need to have a discussion.
Yeah, and this.
So now something like this, where it was, probably a budgeting mistake in the beginning of the fiscal year or something extraordinary that happened during the year. I mean, this is something that you go through, you see if you can find the money. You can't. Then you come back to us and say, we've exhausted everything. We're going to be overspent on these lines. We need to do something.
Yeah.
Can we do a reserve fund? That type of thing.
Yeah, I think
This is more of something that fits the policy than the construction stuff that Ed had. So
yeah, and I am curious, Alicia. So this is a utilities issue. So this is LEWD, a rate increase that I know this board wasn't notified initially of the rate increase. I don't know if that was ever briefed that we were going to have a rate increase that would cause, and I'm assuming it's significant deficit from what we predicted. So I know they're going to be briefing us. We're going to have them in front of us in March, and I'm going to bring it up directly. I think we need to talk about expected rate increases, and if they are expected, and when their board meets to raise these increases, we obviously the town finance office needs to be clearly notified of those increases so we can plan accordingly. It's actually surprising to me that did not happen, to be honest with you. Granted, we have a new building, a library that is drawing now on a significant amount of energy, but that still should have been some type of a plan, or this is based on an increase because we did plan for the library. So,
Yeah, I know the library wanted to put solar panels on, and they did get an earmark from the state.
they're definitely going to, for sure.
Yep, it's just the state wants the money spent by June 30th, and the contractors are concerned with signing a commitment to have it all done by June 30th because of COVID and the delay in some of the supplies. So the state's working with them to help them get those in place.
Maybe get a waiver even to extend it due to.
How much of the deficit is from the library? Do we know?
It's about $4,000 a month.
And that's contributing to it, or
Yeah, that's
that
contributing
budget?
to it. That's contributing to it.
But we're not seeing a decrease from the vacated space that they're.
So
Not using
consumption
it.
is down, but even though consumption is down, the rate is up.
That's the problem. That's something we definitely weren't notified of. So something, I guess, Jerry, if you're on one of their meetings.
Yeah,
but
tomorrow night.
Oh, okay. Just bring it up. It's not accusatory by any means. But I'm just curious what the process is to let the town know. And if there isn't a process, we definitely need it to be, especially the more buildings we get, this becomes an issue.
I will do that.
Do you think they'd be uncomfortable with when they're setting the rate if I could be at the meeting? So I used to get the rate sheets for when they set the rates where I was, so I could help with building the budget to make sure it was correct.
Yeah, I'm sure they'd be fine with that.
Yeah. Yeah, you have a good relationship with those guys over there. They'll, especially seeing the, the deficit, it's definitely worthy our attention. So, okay, what else do you have? Anything? So the schools, for those that don't know, that the school actually, we had a $450,000 request for a feasibility for Shaker Lane. I believe it bumped to $750 once the OPM. So there you go. The cost of everything right now is through the roof. I've never seen a request off by that much, but I don't know if the school committee was just asking us to earmark $450 for that to go towards it, or if they thought that was actually going to be the price. So I don't remember that conversation on whether. But either way, it's a lot more money than we had planned initially in our last budget meeting with the select board. So 300,000 more.
But will they? And I think this was mentioned at the Saturday meeting by the school committee members there. But so we made the preliminary list. Is that it?
Yes.
And somebody had mentioned that sometime in March we'll find out whether we've made the final list or not.
Timing's everything.
Right. So when in March, I mean, we still have time before we go to do a budget to say, let's put the extra 250 to the schools. And if they don't make that final list, we can take that 250 and maybe move it to the senior center for now, and knowing that we have to fund this next year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have options, but
Yeah. Just comes down to timing. You're right.
yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah, Alicia has to finish the audit, so she's working on that. I get the CFA reported, which is a schedule of expenses for federal awards. You're going to have a single audit. We haven't had a single audit because we haven't had any big federal money, but obviously you do now with the CARES money and now the ARPA. The one big thing I've been really kind of pushing is having an ARPA spending plan. because 2024, we have to have it committed, and then the sewer one will be fine as long as it's committed to up to 2026 because it's infrastructure. But any of the positions, I only have till 2024.
Okay. Well, we can talk a little bit about that, I guess, as we spill into our FY23 budget update conversation. Our last meeting with the select board, and we're going to be, I'm not sure the exact date. We're going to be meeting with them, I think, the first week of March. Is that same type of meeting we had on Saturday, except it'll be a weeknight, and we'll try to resolve all, if not most, hopefully, some of the lingering budget issues that we had or requests that we hadn't resolved yet. And that most of them were personnel, I believe. A lot of the other pieces were still moving, and they are still moving. The school obviously was a big one of those. So I think as a board, we haven't really talked much about some of the requests. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about anything specific regarding some of the personnel requests that are out there. Do I think that it's a smart idea to approve 11 positions, I think were the total that were asked for, or probably not. It's probably not good for in 1 year for sure. But at the same token, I don't want to demean, the need or the necessity that the department heads came forward and spoke to regarding each individual request. But I do realize we're going to have to make some tough decisions with the select board. So if there's anything,
The facilities position, I think, is important, especially with what I've been seeing in the facilities going on with the rate changing, somebody actually monitoring usage and consumption, somebody looking at how we can save money and how we're using things. I think they're important.
Yeah.
I think that would be an important position for the town. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that recognition took place a few years ago when we were initially going to approve it before COVID hit. But
I know the whole thing with the school department and the facilities director is kind of still up in the air. How do we share the position? What do we do? Who pays for it? I mean, that shouldn't stop us, I don't think, from getting that position in the town. And if he just deals with town buildings for now, he just deals with town buildings, and then we can progress into bringing in the schools later on. But we really waited for this position for years. It's
We've been
costing
talking
us
about
money.
it for
We're proving
a
it this
decade or
year.
more.
Yeah, it's costing us money.
okay, so that might be one that we push hard on. I think it's the value in it. It's hard to know what that value is, but Alicia, you're right to some extent. I think, would this have happened if we had a facilities person on board, knowing the costs of what some of these costs would be? Maybe not. It's only going to get bigger, that position, because of what's some of the projects that are coming up for us. So I know some of I will call them lock-ins that we talked to. I think just judging the room, when we were in those meetings, it looks like the police position seemed to have, everybody seemed to be on board with that. And I people that watched the meeting, I got a little pushback on. I know we kind of let one kind of sweep or pushed in the background, which is the fact we just hired a police officer in January with ARPA money, right? And now this next one comes on board, if it gets approved, obviously, with the new fiscal year in July. So I just we probably need to talk about that position as well. I mean, I do want to talk about all of them if somebody wants to bring them up. But what is, what that need looks like.
Yeah. I'm kind of swaying back and forth on this police one. All I can remember when the chief was speaking was his plan to have 25 officers in a couple of years before he retires, he said. And that this one was in preparation for the details he was going to face because he can't use reserves. Well, is there somewhere else we can get detailed officers from without having to hire somebody?
Well, Middlesex,
Anywhere.
sheriffs, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm kind of on the fence on this one.
You can kick it, you can kick the can down the road. I mean, we're gonna need more officers as the town continues to grow. I mean, this project at the IBM building, I know it's a little ways out, but you're gonna add 15, maybe 17% population in a very short period of time to this town. You're gonna need more police and fire support for that.
Right.
So
but
do we do it now knowing that we're getting it up to speed, or do we hold off another year maybe until it gets a little bit closer and time that so that you add the additional officer in?
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing like with the sewer. I mean, we're not going to start the sewer until there's permits that are approved on that building. So why hire people when we don't even have permits on that building yet?
You still need to approve the positions though, because the permits could happen pretty quick.
Yeah, but then you have construction.
True, that's true. That's a year or two.
Yeah. Oh, too. It's a big project.
Yep.
And when we go through these positions, this is just us talking about it, but I know when we get in the bigger group, I think the last couple of years, we've based it on a consensus. If we had the majority of people between the select board and Fincom vote for a position, it would go forward and we would fund it. That doesn't have to be that way. We, as a finance committee, we can vote on the positions. But this is one of those things I do like to bridge communication with the select board so we come to some agreement on these. And if they're buying in to our board and their board making a decision, whether a couple of their members are against it, then I think it makes sense to vote as a group. The 13 of us, 12 of us, yeah, the 12 of us to vote. But once again, I know, Steve, you were probably here, and a few of you were here long before me that could speak to two separate budgets going forward, right? A finance and select board, because we couldn't come to an agreement.
Yeah.
But we do want to avoid that. So that's why I.
No, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. And, we shouldn't, try and steer off from a process that's worked in the past couple of years and the two committees getting together. Yeah. And we should give it a shot. But
vote for.
We've never really discussed these things between ourselves.
Right.
That's all.
Right.
I would agree with you on that, Stephen, Mr. Chair. I mean, after getting sticker shock from my property tax bill, I'm inclined to say no to everything and let's take a more.
I don't know if that's going to stop your bill going down.
No, I mean, Jesus, I fell out of my chair when I got that bill. But I am, but I am concerned. There's things that we need, and I think that position, facilities manager position, like Steve said, we've been kicking that around for a decade or more. We really need that position, and it's a pay now or pay later type position where we get somebody identifying some problems with buildings that we can identify the issue early. It's going to be less costly to repair than if all of a sudden it becomes a crisis and we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix whatever the problem is. Yeah. So I do think there's merit there, and I think we'll get a benefit from that position. The rest of them I'm all just not sure about right now.
Yeah, you can look at each one individually. Obviously, the finance analyst position. I've spent a lot of time, obviously, with finance and HR, trying to figure out when we look at Littleton. I use the word birth. Finance gave birth to HR in Littleton, right? We basically ripped them apart. Mm-hmm. And I knew there'd be some type of fallout. We can't just pull these two departments away from each other and not fully understand what each department is going to need to address, what's left. So to include some of and I know, Steve, you might be a little involved in this, and Alicia, you certainly are, where some of these things fall with benefits and different things like that. It kind of, when we had everybody together, the finance and HR, it worked fine. But now there's these lingering pieces that are left in the middle. Well, whose are they, HR or are they finance? And those pieces are really going to drive potentially where positions end up. If we need a new body in finance, because we're taking on more responsibility there. And, the HR position as well that's out there. And if I get a read off of the Saturday meeting, it seemed like the HR position was more of a wait. Let's wait until the 3-person board comes on and see how they're going to assist and really get a feel how the HR department's going to function. But so the finance analyst piece, Alicia, I know I spoke with you. You can speak to it a little more on how.
Yeah, Michelle does the warrants. She pulls in the receipts, and I feel like she's kind of pigeonholed in one area. So if I'm not there, then there are certain things she cannot do,
right,
and she's supposed to be my backup. So when I'm not there, these things continue on. The town doesn't have to worry. So my goal for her is to have her certified within the next 4 years and sit with her and show her how I'm doing the balance sheet, how I do the recap, how I do all these things. So if something happens, there's somebody the town can keep going.
Yeah.
Right now, she has to do the warrant. She has to do this. So she's only in one area. So I need help so somebody can take some of that off of her and she can help me. Because either that or I'm sitting in my chair till 9 o'clock at night.
Right.
And you can't just show someone those things once and then expect them to be able to do them, when you're out. They have to, it has to be a long time learning, I'm doing.
Yeah, it usually takes about 3 years. So there's 3 years at the school. So she'll take track 1, track 2, track 3, and then the exam.
From my notes, the financial analyst position kind of made it through.
Yeah.
That Saturday.
So too. And I just wanted to mention that that's kind of why it was, there's going to be some fallout here, probably spilling into even next fiscal year on what the true needs of HR and finance are. So I just think something we really need to look at, not just in personnel, but in these leftover pieces.
One of the things, and you've heard me say this before, that having the payroll function and the benefit function and the HR function under one umbrella solved a lot of these issues that they're going through right now. And it was an audit recommendation that we had to separate the two, not because they needed to be under different bosses, is because the people in HR had access to payroll and payroll had the access to set up an employee, that type of thing. So there was no controls to keep jobs separate. You can still do that under one boss. You could have 2 separate areas under one supervisor. So if, I'll say something dramatic here, I'll bring payroll up to HR. So take it out of the treasurer's office, put it up to HR. You have a payroll person or person and a half or whatever in payroll, and you have your benefits person with Michelle on top, who's in charge of the whole function. There's no fighting who controls what. It's all in one area. You put controls in place so that the payroll person can't set up an employee. The person who's setting up an employee can't pay payroll. It makes so much more sense than what they're going through right now. Going like this, saying, it's not my job, it's your job, it's not my job. Nothing gets done.
I agree, and I wish I was at the budget meetings because the reason I want to upgrade Anna's position is I want to permanently take some of that away. Exactly what you're saying, Steve, and give it to Anna. she's excellent at doing the payroll. She knows what she's doing. It would take stress off of HR. I know has tons of work, just like we do, but some of it we could take.
But that doesn't solve the issues that Sean's saying, this isn't our position to do. This isn't our job.
No, it would solve it. If I was there, it would solve it, because they are going to sit down and divvy out. They're going to speak who does what. And then they have to figure that out. There's no more this. They are going to sit down. They're having meetings. So they're working it out between the two of them. But I want to make Anna really the payroll person, because she's very, very good at it.
But she is the payroll person.
Yeah, she does that. She was picking up on the benefits. She was.
See, that she can't.
She was doing. She knows how to do a lot of it.
But that was the audit finding. You have to keep those things separate. You have to keep the new employee piece separate from the payroll piece. That's why the departments were split. Anna can't be going into the setup piece of a person.
Right.
Payroll is supposed to be running payroll. I push a button, I'm generating a payroll for that week. I'm not setting up employees. I'm not changing anything. That all needs to be done in HR.
Right, and that's what they're working on.
That was the audit finding. So you can't be increasing Anna's job to do some of that, because now you're creating that conflict again.
Yeah.
That the audit finding was supposed to stop.
Yep, no, they would still create upstairs, but she's still doing that, and then she could look at the benefits and the billing. She can do that, which they were doing.
I think you need to have Anthony in that conversation.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think that's
A new employee or a terminated employee starts up in HR. That's where it goes. When they're generating that final paycheck for somebody, they're supposed to be changing the benefits. If somebody's adding a medical, for example, they're not going to Anna to say, I need medical. They're going to HR to get enrolled in medical. So why wouldn't HR take care of the record right there? We have a benefits person. Why wouldn't they do it there? Why would Anna be involved in that?
I don't want to
Probably on this meeting. I'm sorry if I'm getting.
Well, I'm talking about the billing portion.
We shouldn't be.
I'm talking about on the benefit side of the billing.
The billing.
Yeah.
Yes, that's debatable where that goes.
Yeah, see, this is the discussion that needs to happen. Like I said, there's fallout from this department being ripped apart, and where these are, you couldn't possibly have predicted every one of these things that were going to become an issue a year later, and here we are. But I think I know Anthony's aware of it. Obviously, Alicia and Michelle are very aware of it. And yeah, getting everybody in a room and dividing this up. Yes, with the audit there on the side. Granted, an audit is a recommendation. It's not like a absolutism type thing, but you should pay real heed attention because it's proven practice to some degree. But there still might be some efficiencies there that are outside that audit that we can research, but definitely need to get everybody in a room for that. But I think
I'll say it one more time, Alicia. You need help with stuff in sitting down with Sean and Michelle with this stuff. I am more than happy to go in and help.
Steve, you're awesome.
I've offered it 3 times already, and nobody's taken me up on it. So now
I'll take you up on it, Steve.
it costs too much.
Any help you can give, any knowledge, I'm willing to take it.
All right, let's talk. So those 2 positions, obviously, there's discussion. But I think the financial analyst, even without this discussion, seemed like something that was needed in the office. So, let's see. In the HR one looked like we were going to wait. Is that fair?
Yeah, until all this is sorted out, I think. Yeah.
The other one is, let's see. So, Health and Human Services, that position looked like if people understood the value in that position. We won't have to get into that too much. I think the the need has definitely shown itself. Liz presented it well, and the outreach is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's only going to grow as some of these programs try to reach out to the aging community and the disabled community and people that need help. So, what other ones were we? Let's see.
Fire prevention officer?
Yeah. So this has been a hot button one. It seems like the select board seems to be really debating this one more than anyone. We haven't really talked about it much as a group. I know it came up, I think last year. It's the first time I saw it come forward. Greg, is that right? Probably last year we saw the finance.
It was either last year or the year before.
Probably 2 years ago. When I see things like that, I do a little bit of my own research. I know that position is typically a firefighter does that job. Littleton, it looks like it's being pitched more as a lieutenant, still in the bargaining unit, like it would be otherwise. More so that it can compete because it's a valuable position and not everybody wants it. But, the need's there. If it's another way to get a body for the fire department, that's good. But I don't know how everybody else feels about it. I'm really, a couple of years ago, I wasn't sure. I know it was the assistant. It was Tom's job when we had a chief. It was just part of his extra duties. I don't think that's probably the best way to have it, but like I said, I don't know enough about the fire department's operations besides what Tom's presented us to really speak much to it. So
I can tell you right now, we're paying a deputy chief to be a fire prevention officer because he's not doing any before he was interim, but while Scott was there, all we were doing was paying a deputy chief to be the fire, because that was his full-time job, basically. He wasn't being a deputy chief.
Well, that in itself sounds like a need.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm kind of okay with it because I know what Tom has been doing the past few years doing this job.
I
think at one point that they made on Saturday that was a good one, or a couple Saturdays ago that was a good one, is we're going to be hiring a new chief. So what does the new chief want to do? I think that is an important point.
Yeah. And I think, but that was more of almost in detriment to getting this position. It sounded like the select board pitch. That's right. I remember that. They had mentioned that kind of wait and see how the chief wants to lay out this department. Well, maybe that coincides potentially before the budget happens. Probably not. Looks like we're going to have an interim chief for the next 6 weeks before we actually get our full-time chief.
Hey, Gary, do you know if this new chief is going to be a strong chief? Or are they going to change that?
They are not going to change it. There's been talk about the select board putting it on the warrant potentially to go forward with the change. I don't know if that had traction or if they're seriously considering it. That would be the only way for it to go to town vote. But right now,
That might be more appealing to a new chief if they're coming in as the strong chief and they can pick and choose who they want to hire as.
Well, to be honest with you, Greg, it posted as a strong chief, so it's a strong chief.
It's a strong chief, okay.
Because they've already, the final two candidates are going in front of the select board either next week or the week after. They couldn't do it this week because people are on vacation and et cetera. But so that it's definitely going to be a strong chief unless something drastically changes.
So assuming it's a strong chief and based on what was discussed on Super Saturday, it seems to make sense to hold off on this until the new chief is hired so they can pick and choose, who they want to fill this role. Should we approve
Regardless,
This goes back to the same thing I said about the police officer. Public safety is number one in this town, and this falls under public safety, of course. And as our town grows, we're going to need more help. There's no way around this. So do you do it now or do you wait? That's the $1 million question.
I think there's a little bit more urgency on this one than the police one.
I would agree with you on that, Mr. Venuti. I would agree.
But once again, even if it got approved, the new chief would probably be the hiring authority on it. There's no rush to get the person in next week or next year. Next year, he'd have time to bring the person on board. But
It's one of those positions, and it was brought up on that Saturday. Well, we have an idea that we want it. Let's put the money aside without putting it right into the fire department's budget. And if the chief decides, then we can transfer the money in. And if he decides not to, then it just sits there and rolls to free cash. That's all.
sounds like
There was a couple of positions like that I think.
it sounds like what the schools do.
Exactly, yeah.
Sounds like what the schools do that, right?
Yeah.
But there's a benefit to being able to hire the right person when they come along as opposed to having to fill a position because you only had that opportunity this year.
Yeah. It's true.
One of the things, Alicia, I'm sure Sean has shared with you the sheet that he did. He did like a 5 or 6 page like summary for us for that Saturday.
Probably did. I'd have to look back
Yeah,
to see if I can locate it.
if you could maybe ask him to update it
Okay.
with the changes that have happened and maybe based on his notes of what happened at that meeting, maybe put in, these are the ones that we discussed. These are the positions that kind of made it through. These are the ones that were being held. These are the ones that we threw out. And same thing with the capital items that we talked about.
Yep.
Just, it'll be a good starting point for us, I think, for that
Yeah,
meeting.
that would be helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Good suggestion, Steve.
Because I know we forgot on our highlights, the assistant planning director as one position. So I don't know if that got corrected. No? Okay.
My Word document, for whatever reason, will not open. Does anybody have some of the other positions in front of them that we discussed?
I have them all. So
Okay.
there's the,
But we had the conservation
Yep.
assistant, that kind of made it through because
Yep. It did.
of what's going on up there.
Like I said, I don't want to
Board
put
of Health.
don't put any words in everyone's mouth, but when we do meet and we do a final vote on these positions, whatever you think, just vote. This isn't a pressure thing. We're not looking necessarily for unanimous votes. We're all trying to be fiscally responsible. So just bear that in mind that we'll just kind of go with what we think is best for the, as we move forward, the town. So you mentioned the health agent. That sounded like something that the town wants to, as a whole, town administration, select board sound like they really want to move forward with a health agent. Is that the feel you got?
The feeling I got is we have no choice.
Yeah, because we're pulling out of the Neshoba. I had recommended that we hire a new health agent, but we stay on with Neshoba for a year. Just to kind of transition this whole thing in, because who knows? Yeah, I'm just worried if this position goes through and gets hired in October, we go 3 months without a health agent or a health department.
Yeah.
So Neshoba doesn't want to do a la carte. So
And where's the backup to the position
should
too?
probably, and then that probably will happen. We'll jump on for another year. I don't think it was crazy money. But they weren't also doing half the things we need them to do. So, or being timely. But yeah, I think that position looked like it's something where it's become more of an absolute need than a want for sure.
I can tell you that's one department and position that's going to grow into more than what it is because
Yeah, you mentioned that before. Are we going to end up with an admin for that?
an
department.
admin and
Health department,
backup, we're going to need an assistant and
another nurse, maybe. I don't
yeah, they already talking about a nurse.
Littleton Health Corporation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, what is another one, Alicia, that we...
I know you talked about Liz as social worker.
Yeah, anybody wants to talk more about that? I thought that need was there a a few years ago, but we've transitioned. Well, this is on our second iteration, but we've jumped through a couple directors in that department. But it's just become evident that there's a whole lot more outreach out there. The last thing we want is to have part of our community or individuals that need the assistance that don't get it.
Yeah.
I was actually surprised. I was, talking to Sean a little bit about some of the senior tax type benefits that we can utilize, whether it's, foregoing the taxes until the house property sells, things like that, that there were only one or two individuals in the town enrolled in, which leads me to believe right there that there can be more outreach when we're talking about affordability in Littleton for seniors. I mean, Greg points out every time I see him, it's hard enough on working, those of us that are working, it's extremely hard on obviously the fixed income.
Fixed income right here.
We're all on a fixed income.
It's not only that, but the economics of it. You want them to age in place. You don't want them moving out, because what's going to move in is a family, and now you got more kids in the school system. So anything we can do, in my opinion, anything we can do from the town's perspective to keep those people in their homes serves us better than it does having them move out and going someplace they may not want to go. And
But that was the absolute toughest thing about the treasurer position, is having to deal with seniors that were behind in their taxes and having to have that conversation with them when they're in tax title.
Yeah.
And there was a couple that, we had to make the tough decision with them that it was best for them to move. And I'm dealing with the family, trying to convince them that the house was just too big for you now. And it was great when you had a family, but you're all alone now and you can't swing it. And I had one senior, when the family lawyer finally talked to her about moving and she finally did move, the lawyer called me back and says she is so happy that she made that decision to move out, and, thanked me for working with them basically to, let them go longer in tax deficit like that. So sometimes it works out, and sometimes you get the people that just don't want to work with you, and you have no choice but to be mean. And
not envious, Steve.
That was
Not
the
envious.
worst part of that job. I hated tax, hated it.
Well, and I think you're probably going to see a lot more of it as inflation, as you all know, inflation going through the roof the last year. Fixed income's going to get squeezed even more.
Right. And some of these houses get flipped upside down for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. What was another one, Alicia? We have.
After that, the teen librarian increasing hours from 30 to 37.5.
Yeah. You know what? I think we all pretend we didn't, or at least some pretended that there wasn't going to be a need for increased hours in that new beautiful facility. Somehow, I don't know whether people had their head in the sand, but I think, us as a board kind of knew that was going to happen. Even to the point of we were not going to increase anyone's hours or hire anyone when the library was still over in the other space, because we didn't know what it was going to look like over there and what their needs were. Well, now they're presenting us with a need. So it seemed logical to me. It's a benefit eligible employee. You're adding some hours, still a benefit eligible employee. It seemed like a more logical thing to me, but it seemed to get a little bit more resistance than I thought from, I think, some of the select board members. But so that's something just to think about.
I thought it wasn't a benefit eligible employee. They were just looking to add hours to the teens, not one person going to 37 and a half.
Oh, that's interesting. Was it a 30 to 37?
It's 30 to 37 and a half.
Yeah.
So they're already.
I don't think it was necessarily one person. It was like
there was a couple of different. I think you're right, Jerry. There was a couple of different movements and.
So I don't think it was changed anything with benefits. I think it was just cost of the income, the salary.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that one to me seemed fair, but like I said,
It says on there, it says FTE added 0. So I'm confused if they're not, it looks like they're not adding an employee, but it's a drop, like there's more than one teen librarian.
no, I think it was more all increased hours, but it wasn't affecting the benefit status on either.
I think if you read the narrative that they submitted,
Yeah.
it's different than this sheet, I think.
Okay. We talked about facilities director, and the other one is the assistant planner in the land use department.
So this-
Yeah, I'm on the
Putting
fence
on
on
my,
that one.
putting on my old planning board hat, I mean, how much more development are we gonna have in town? That's the $1 million question in my mind, you know, and if we're thinking that, you know, obviously bringing in sewer into the common is gonna change the way the common is gonna look. It's gonna change the development for the common area. But beyond that, I mean, how much more development is gonna go on? And is this position needed long-term, or is it an establishment now because it's maybe needed now, but it might not be needed in 10 years because all the developments happened, and how much planning do you need to do if there isn't any development?
The only, I agree with you, Greg, on that one. The only caveat that I would put in there is it more succession planning for Maren?
I didn't
Who
think of that.
knows how many more years Maren's going to be here, so there could be some transition there that is worthwhile. But in the whole scheme of things, does it warrant Maren getting an upgrade in her job to fit this in here, which is what this is suggesting, that everybody's going to get a bump. And I don't think everybody needs to get a bump to bring in somebody below Maren to maybe help her. So
yeah, that's more of the debate, you know, in question is what warrants a bump, right? Without getting it, that's an HR question, and that's why that 3-person board will have some discussions to be had with, you know, by adding an employee underneath a current supervisor or manager. Does that affect grade necessarily? Not necessarily.
not
And in
necessarily.
many cases, no. You know, you can
What
supervise
happens-
many people, but so.
What happens though when you approve this position? If it is for succession planning, then that position is there, right, to be filled immediately.
Again.
It's always there, or is there any kind of caveat that can be given to those types of roles when you're looking to just get someone up to speed for the future?
Theoretically, but Maren is filling the position. Her position changes. So she actually changes with the position. It's found that this position now is more than it was when she started in it, right?
Okay.
Right? So that's
I don't necessarily agree with that piece of it.
no, I'm not just saying what actually would have to happen unless you said,
That's the plan. Yes, that's on the paper in front of us. That's the plan, that we bring this position in. Maren gets a bump. Because Maren gets a bump, Ed gets a bump. And I don't think those bumps need to happen.
Not only that, but to Jerry's point, I mean, you bring in a position, you create a position for succession planning, and when that person retires and you move that person up, the position's not going to go away. You're going to have to backfill that position too. So it's one of those things where you agree to put this position in, you're agreeing for it for long term. And as I said before, I'm not so sure that long term it's needed. Maybe short term it is, but I'm not sure about long term.
That's good points. Yep.
okay.
So the other one that wasn't on the list was the cemetery assistant manager.
Yeah, so many things I wish were presented differently. I know the number one need discussed in that entire discussion with Ivan was the current, TC can't take a vacation. That's definitely a problem, and it's a management problem, but it's not necessarily a management problem to the extent of getting a new full-time hire into there. yeah, without getting, I can get off the finance horse and talk about, DPW. Either we've talked about this in the past, cemetery falling under DPW somehow, where now we have a resource there that can help the cemeteries. And then in the winter, that cemetery person can now work with DPW on there's a lot to be had there. So it's hard to hire another position because you just want to fill the vacation time and sick time of the current person. And that's kind of the feel I got from that pitch, as opposed to an absolute need that to me might be able to still be filled by seasonal employees. Part-time employees wasn't really discussed. But I really don't know. I'm really torn on this one because, yeah, you're sitting here looking at a one-man show right now because, I understand there's another, is it Lori?
Yeah.
Who's out on medical, correct? So I don't know that whole status on whether that employee's coming back, whether that employee's, I'm not into that, but, and what if that employee came back? Is everything fine? Those,
It worked like that for years, so.
yeah, so I'm just a little.
And they used to share resources too. I recall way back when I was a plow contractor,
Oh, I didn't know that.
that they did some.
A very short time,
Yeah, I remember that.
Keith had reorganized it so cemetery was under DPW.
Correct.
And then something happened and the cemetery commissioners wanted to split again.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened to make that split happen again. But yes, for a very short time, cemetery reported to Chris.
It's hard in a town that has one cemetery, right? An active cemetery. That's probably the biggest difficulty I'm having with it. But
I know they were saying that the problem is like if he was on vacation and they needed to do something, you need someone who can, I don't know, read the plan so they dig up the right spot. But isn't that something we could maybe share with another town to have them cover for us when he's on vacation, for a fee?
yeah, I don't know, and I would think, but I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming there's a whole lot of other towns, probably more west of us than east of us, that only have one cemetery commissioner. I don't know what his title fully is, but so I just don't know on this one, and I'm torn. I probably have to listen to more of the select board talk about it because I just don't know enough about the position. It was a late addition, obviously, literally right before that Saturday. I think it started being kicked around. So I do like the idea of it being under the DPW. I didn't realize it was under there for a short time. That would effectively dissolve the board. The commissioners now would become an advisory board, right? They wouldn't be a cemetery commission. They'd be a cemetery advisory board because now it falls under DPW. But yeah, so if you guys,
Or at least an MOU with some sort of coverage.
that would be huge, right?
That would be huge. I mean, because I'm telling you, I remember this one when I was plowing that there was help there. I can't remember who the cemetery commissioner was at that time, but they helped plow.
What's
I remember.
MOU?
A memorandum of understanding.
Yeah, so there's like sometimes at different departments create a memorandum of understanding on when this is needed, that this department
Fills in.
will assist, or
Yeah.
memorandum of understanding with another town to have, like you mentioned, Jerry, bring in another their resource to do the funeral or whatever. But yeah, it's one that I could have asked more questions on. But I didn't think about a lot of these things till afterwards. On, hey, what is the individual that's currently out on medical coming back? Or does the position continue to be encumbered because the individual's in it on a medical? I mean, there's a lot of questions I just don't know the answer to. But
Yeah.
Okay, what else?
I believe we discussed the 2 police officers already. Then there were some promotional adjustments on the local inspectors. And that's it. I think we went over all of the position changes. We got more money in the cherry sheet because I only estimated 1%. So we have more aid for revenues. So that's going up in addition to the 4.9% through the 8% increase in health insurance, which gives us some more money too.
Good.
Well, I'll have to sit. It's
But we weren't a desperate town when we were like, all right, well, let's just continue to fund as if ARPA does. Part of me really, when I saw some of the costs associated with the sitting here, like, man, we need to be kicking every extra penny to that project. I just don't know how, if we're going to try into the levy under the current construction costs. I don't know how, and I hate to say this, I don't know how it really affects the town's operations. And I really want to see this work. I mean, I'm on the Council on Aging, and I want this to work. It's horrible timing with the construction cost shortages that we have. I just fear going to the town with that cost, having it get voted down, because it's an enormous cost. It looks like it's triple at the end of the day when everything washes out what cost. Granted, the library had a fund source, a grant, and had the fundraising as well, but at the end of the day, it was well under 10 million. And this project right now, it would be a real stretch to get under 10 million. And that's a mark that, talking with Sean and Alicia to some degree, but Sean, while you were out, that's a dangerous number to be flirting anywhere around when you're talking about trying to put it into our levy. So I think it's something, hopefully, I know the select board's working hard at other options. They're bringing other things onto the table. Try to find a better way to do this.
Why not wait? Why do we need to do it now?
Yeah, that's not something that any senior in town wants to hear, for sure.
I know. Nobody's got time. I get that.
That's probably the hardest part.
This bubble's got to burst at some point, and it's you're buying high when you could be buying low. I mean, it seems like an awful expensive project. Plus, our financials are these 2 years coming up. Well, we're in the middle of the next couple of years fiscally. I mean, they're tight years for us.
Yeah, I think they're really starting to look again at current buildings. You weren't thinking that way before, but I think now that's kind of back in play. Trying to figure out if there's another place where this can work that already is built. That the cost savings right now is huge. So,
it's a lot cheaper to buy something that's already pre-built than to do it with
right now
prevailing wage.
Yeah. And I know I talked to Anthony a little bit about it with trying to find other monies, working with our senators and our representatives stuff to try to find, some help for this project, because it's huge. And a lot of other towns are getting money for all these other things that we aren't, because we're looked at as maybe a more affluent community. But this is a need that the town really is desperately presented over. I don't even want to say how many years I've known about it. And I'm sure well before me, they were talking the need of a senior center.
I've been talking about a need of senior center as long as I've been involved in town politics.
Yeah, so there you go, 20 years.
Since the 90s. Yeah. But they've also been talking about a rec center too.
We're getting our pool, let me say.
Hope it's indoor.
All right. Well, that's just kind of a quick, we really just rehashed the personnel requests. So just something to kind of throw back in your minds on. We're going to have to weigh these out. If I could just say, let's hire them all. There's a need here. It's not responsible finances. And this is, this to me is as hard as what Steve was talking about, evicting people, as a treasurer. I hate doing this to managers, because I know that they came to us presented their need for this individual, this person, and we have to weigh it. And that's probably the toughest part of this, but it is what it is. Hey, we didn't get forced into doing this. So
Well, and in some cases, it's not saying no forever. It's just saying no now.
absolutely. No, very true.
I mean, I think people need to understand our financial position here the next couple of years. It's tight. And,
Right, but for every structure like the library,
Mhm.
we stick inside the levy, it kicks out more higher.
Sure.
It does. It equivocally, you can match it. I knew the library was going to hurt us when, personnel, when we're talking new hires. And now,
That's why I didn't vote for it.
but now you have to look ahead. Well, I voted for it outside the levy, so I'm a totally different guy. If you want it, pay for it. But I think these other projects that we want to keep moving into the levy are going to. So when you say we're not saying no forever, well, in the next couple of years we are with Shaker Lane and a senior center. We're definitely, and a sewer.
Well, and Shaker Lane, if it's a $750,000 study, that's going to be a 60, 70, $80 million project. 10%.
I saw that number and I don't know. I felt like I was a 5-year-old kid in school that doesn't understand how that number can exist for a study. I just can't wrap my arms around it. We know we need a school. This one's old. We either renovate or build on that spot or off of another school in town. I don't. But they write me the check, $750. So anyway, this went on a rant there. Any more discussion on the personnel stuff? I think I'm afraid that it's going to move a little faster once we meet with the select board. I think it's just going to be going right down the list and trying to figure this out.
Well, I think like with the facilities director, you already kind of talked about it, but all these big expenses that we've taken on, we need to protect them. And if we need personnel to do that, to protect those investments, then I think that has to be a priority because it is a lot of money.
I agree.
I agree too. Mr. Chair, a couple of things. This meeting that we're going to have with the select board, is it on their meeting time or is it on ours or an independent meeting or what is it?
I'm trying to think. Alicia, did we talk about it? I know it was.
If there's any preference here, I'd prefer it to be on ours because it seems like when we get on their agenda, we're always waiting
it will definitely
half an hour to an hour after scheduled time to go.
Absolutely. I see what you're saying. It will be because it is our meeting.
Okay, so it's gonna be our meeting.
It's like Saturday was our meeting and then the select board is invited.
Very good.
At the end of the day, it's our budget, but.
And I think if we get that sheet that Steve recommended being updated, I think that'll be very helpful so we can just kind of go through it. And if there's any more discussion that needs to be had, we can discuss it at that time. And to your point, Gary, what are the select board's recommendations? They're meeting independently to discuss this, right? Or they have been.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
so let's get their feedback too, so we can
that's what that day will be about. I mean, everyone's had it. They know what's out there. They know the requests. We know what's come in outside of personnel since then. Hopefully, Alicia keeps bringing us a little bit of good news, but there's not much left out there that could come in, I don't think. But maybe every little bit is huge right now. We don't have any public out there, correct, Dave? I hope.
Oh, no, there's no one.
Good. Anything anyone wants to talk about member-wise? I have one personal thing. I'm going to be a grandfather, but
Hey, congratulations.
Congratulations.
my Hawaiian son out there in the Army is having a
Good.
so gives us another reason to go out. That's nice. Sometime in August, I think. But yeah, just continued. I'm glad, like I said, glad to have you back, Alicia. You bring an enormous amount of knowledge to the to the team and to the town, and we counted on Sean for an awful lot, but I know we stretched him thin. So hopefully other things didn't fall to the wayside because of that. But we'll continue to work with you. Whatever you need, just let us know, and we'll.
I want to thank Steve. Steve helped me out tremendously because I did costing of contracts, so he did that for me. And I loved your format. I love your Excel skills. I saved it.
Oh, we got to keep him around. He's
Wonderful. So
He's on
and
the
I-
payroll without being on the payroll.
I'll get you a gift
Yeah.
card.
Yeah.
he's been a definite wealth of knowledge, a really good resource for me, really helpful, took a lot of time out before, went through the whole budget book with me, and I just appreciate his time, so I want to thank him for that.
Not a problem at all.
Thank you, Steve.
And Sean's been great. I told Sean, thank you so much for doing the budget, and Michelle was handling the accounting, so I'm trying to catch up like on getting the annual report and some auditing things, but they made sure the day-to-day kept going, so I have an awesome team, and I'm very thankful.
Well, hopefully we can vote in some help. I don't think we have minutes. Did we get minutes? Let me see. Yeah, we'll kick minutes to our next meeting. Did we get minutes? Let me look at my.
We did, but I can't find the email. We did get minutes.
Did everyone look at the minutes? All right, I'm gonna kick it to next meeting. That's not a big deal. No problem. And I'll refresh it and send it out, or I'll have Marilyn do it. That's really all I have. That's definitely a lot more time, but I'm glad we got to talk a little bit more about the personnel requests. Look at those a little harder and make some of those tough decisions, and we'll have a better picture, hopefully, of the budget overall. That might help us make these decisions. I mean, there's a big difference between bringing on, 5 of these people or 7 of these people or 9 of these people, or and how that affects the budget. And hopefully we have a little bit clearer picture what that's going to look like when we meet again. So, Alicia, if we don't have anything else, I will just post for our next meeting to be with the select board, unless they want to kick it out another week. We need to meet before then for reserve fund or something might come in. But other than that, I'll let everybody know well in advance, what the select board has decided. So I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded by Steve. I'll do a roll call. All those in favor: Jerry,
Aye.
Greg,
Yeah. Yes.
Al,
Aye.
Steve.
Aye.
And I'm a yes. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Take
Good
care,
night.
everybody.